and officially kick off our talking circle on today, March 9th, for the ARP-AIRE grantees. So glad you could all make it here today. We'll begin as we always do with our standard disclaimer.
This presentation was produced under U.S. Department of Education contract number GS00F115CA with Synergy Enterprises, Inc. The views expressed herein do not necessarily represent the positions or policies of the U.S. Department of Education. No official endorsement by the U.S. Department of Education of any product, commodity, service, or enterprise mentioned herein is intended or should be inferred.
Okay, we have all been officially disclaimed now. So we can go ahead and get started and take a look at our agenda for today. So on the screen right now, you see today's topics for discussion and activity. In a moment here, we have a quick poll just to get a sense of where everybody is at in terms of service delivery and give you a little bit of time and opportunity to get to know your fellow grantees a little bit better. Most of our time today, we're actually going to provide a good deal of time, excuse me, to work on some program measures in preparation for your first annual performance report that will come due a little later this spring. And we'll share some dates. We'll set for your due dates. We'll also share some dates for some other supportive webinars to help you get ready for that. But we did want to carve out a good portion of today for you to work on some of those project measures to really get set up for success when those annual performance reports come around. And then finally, we'll have a little bit of time remaining at the end for some additional program sharing around the other all-important issue of data sharing agreements. And then we have some special announcements and events to be made before we close out today. So we hope that you'll be able to stick around for our full session today and hear about those exciting things that are coming up. I'm joined today by your program officer, Ms. Shala Ortega. She is here today to support us and respond to any questions that come up, and we're very pleased that she could be here to support us today. Welcome, Shala.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Thanks. Welcome, everyone.
Very good. Okay, well, let's go ahead and get started with that poll, that little poll that I promised. And we'll follow that up with a little bit of sharing. You should see that popping up on your screen right now. It's the same questions that appear on my screen. We really just want to kind of get a feel for where everybody is at in terms of program service delivery, as well as the format that you're currently operating in. I see we got a couple responses coming in. There's 2 questions there. Okay. Give you just a minute to respond to that and make sure we get everybody who's here an opportunity. Okay. Well, I think we've got just the 4 of us on today. So I think, can everybody see the results of this? This is not a gotcha. We're not trying to, this isn't a reporting question. This is really, like I said, just to kind of get a sense of where folks are at. So it looks like some of your respondents here are still have not yet started offering services. The 2 respondents that are indicate that they are providing both, providing either in person or both. So interesting there that nobody clicked that they're providing services online or virtually. So maybe let's just take a couple of minutes now and kind of reflect on those results and give you some space to share out. Are there any challenges or obstacles that you're encountering right now when it comes to providing those services? Or maybe any wins that you've had recently in preparing to offer services? Can feel free to come off mute.
Hello, Tracy. This is Cameron Greendeer.
Hi.
Hi, and can you repeat the first part of that question?
Yeah. So I'm seeing in the poll results here, and I'll go ahead and share those now. We can just see the aggregate responses. I see that 3 of the 5 respondents are not currently providing services. So we're just wondering if there's any challenges or obstacles that you've encountered along the way, or maybe some wins that you've had in terms of preparing to provide services.
So yeah, the services part is mostly my previous position here was the NYCP grant manager, and so there was a lot of college and career readiness portion of that, and so I do have some questions that come up about that and some guidance questions. So I handle those. It's not a majority or focus of what I do every day, but obviously parents and students will come up to me and ask me certain things. So it's I would say I give them as much information as I had from the NYCP as far as scholarship guidance, and also yeah, just other resources that they can use. But again, I know it's not the focus of the STEP grant, so I handle that very quickly. But I tried to stay in touch with their progress if they need any help along the way. So we do meet with the students virtual. We've done both when it's just a quick update of look out for this, look out for that. Possible services coming up with the new ARP, whatnot. So but also in person, we have met with the students and talked about possible resources coming up, possible opportunities. So again, I know the focus of our STEP is not providing direct services, so there's nothing really coming along as far as stipends or helping out assistance in any way or form of that. But the guidance part, as far as college and career, we still get questions about that, so we handle that.
Thanks for sharing, Cameron. And it sounds like you're one of several of our grantees who's actually juggling multiple grants. And you're right, they do come along with different requirements and ability to provide services. So if you're just joining us, we're having a little reflection here and program sharing amongst our ARP-AIRE grantees, which is focused on providing services, direct services to youth. And we're just wondering if you've started providing services, what format you're providing those in, and if there's any challenges or successes that you'd like to share in terms of preparing to provide services or actually delivering those services.
I also wanted to tell you that it has been difficult coming back from COVID with a lot of restriction, and then trying to get back into motivating these students, engaging with them. It's kind of like a reintroduction, like we didn't know them for the longest time. And so the whole COVID coming off of it and getting reestablished and networking again with these students, it's just, it's been a little slow, but I'm sure it'll come around the more we go on. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I've heard that from other places as well. We've been out of school and engaging with school or programs in different ways, and it is almost like a reorientation if we're starting to be in person or making those in-person connections again. Reestablishing those relationships definitely takes time.
Tracy,
please.
Good morning.
Good morning.
This is Chris Meyer with the Coeur d'Alene Tribe Department of Education, and we have an ARP grant. And actually, as soon as we heard that we were receiving funding, we started work right away. Ours is on developing our students. There was a bill that was passed in Idaho, HB 377, and it's been misunderstood, but teaching culture or teaching the history of our tribe is not very welcome at this time within the school district. So we wrote ours based upon developing a summer internship program. And so we have spent the entire fall, winter on designing a program. The focus is on the southern end of the reservation between 1841 and 1907. So they're going to learn about Hangman Creek, the history of Hangman Creek and how the tribe came to be there. The present day, all of the work that the tribe is engaged in repairing those ruptures that occurred within that space and with our people, and then the future. And so our team meets every single week now because we're in the process of marketing that program, enrolling students in that 4-week project. Our whole goal is for our kids to become knowledgeable about Coeur d'Alene history. And to be honest, all of us are going through that same process. We've been researching, finding every article we possibly can on that space and what occurred in that space, and lining up all the professional speakers that can help with our understanding and the kids' understanding. We want to raise their critical consciousness so they know their history and the impact that policies had had on that place and our people. So, and then our early childhood component, we're ready to launch one of our first units this spring. Again, the focus is on our kids learning about who they are, identity development, etc. So it's quite a learning process.
Like you're getting things, you're starting to get things launched and rolling and implementing. Good.
We are. We are looking forward to, because we're planning for 6. There's photography, podcasting, art, and then 3 others. So the end product is going to be a reflection of their track, and it can focus on the history of that place, the present day, or what they perceive that space could be in the future.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. We lost you for just a second there, or maybe it's just on my end, but I heard some of the other services or activities that you plan on supporting with their around art, photography, and that sort of thing. So thank you.
You're welcome.
We've got time for maybe 1 or 2 more shares. Those of you who are maybe doing both virtual online things as well as in person, are you planning to transition that to be in person, or are you planning to keep some online services? I can see in the chat box there too with some comments about, the variants, the COVID variants and other situations definitely impact being able to move forward at times. Maybe you're having some of those same challenges. Can feel free to come off mute or type into the chat box if you have any reflections about that. Okay, well, I will keep us moving along if we don't have any additional thoughts to share there, but thank you for giving us your feedback and input about your current status and where you're at. It sounds like most of you here today are still in that getting ready to implement stage. So we'll go ahead and move on to our next topic of conversations, which is preparing for those annual performance reports. So if you are like some folks and you operate multiple grants from the Office of Indian Education, this may not be your first go around with APR season. But some of you may be new to your position. Maybe you've haven't been involved with the annual performance reporting before, but know that is coming up. So let's just chat for a minute about the purpose behind the APRs. This is important for a number of different reasons. One of them being that the annual performance report, or the APR, is a federal grant requirement, and it really is that primary document that gets submitted annually that not only allows you to document your progress towards project objectives that were agreed to in your approved proposal, but it's also the document that's used to assess making substantial progress. The annual performance reports and the information that's submitted there tells Congress that, you know, we're being good stewards of those tax dollars and making progress towards our stated objectives. It's also used to inform continuation awards for subsequent years of your grant. So it's really important to pay attention to those and to make sure they're thorough and complete. And while it may seem like we have a lot of time, I can promise you that this due date of June 6th is going to come up quickly. So there's some important things that you can do now to really get yourself and your program set up for success with your annual performance report, or APR. We're going to spend a little bit of time today kind of talking through and workshopping, defining your program measures so that you have time to think about that, as well as collect some of the data that you'll need to report between now and June 6th. So you may already know that there are two types of measures that are included in your annual performance report. One of those are the project measures. These are developed and defined by each grant program. They're specific to that approved grant that you were awarded. They show progress. These project measures are developed and designed and articulated so that you can show progress that your project is making towards your objectives. We're going to spend a little bit of time today actually developing some using the SMART approach, and this is where it may be handy to have a copy of your approved application. It's not required, but if you happen to have an electronic copy, or maybe you have a printed copy of your approved grant application, you can have that handy for your breakout rooms when we get to that point. Much of the information that you'll need to develop your program measures can be found in that document, specifically within the logic model that was required in those applications. So we'll get into that in a little bit more. But the second type of measure that you'll also report on are those Government Performance and Result Act, or GEPRA measures. We call those GEPRA measures for short. These are the measures that are defined by the Department of Education. They appear in that original notice inviting applicants, and everybody, all of your programs, report on GEPRA measures for your ARP-AIRE program. Now, the ARP-AIRE grant program, has only one GEPRA measure, which really functions like a summary of your program measures. So we're going to take a look at that specific GEPRA measure for the ARP-AIRE grant program in just a minute, but we want to begin with your program measures first. And I think that'll make sense once we work through the development of some examples and actual program measures. So when we're developing program measures that are specific to your grant program and that approved application, where do you start? I already mentioned that it might be handy to have that approved proposal. handy so that you can look at that and work from that today and actually do a little bit of work on this while we're all together and you have some colleagues to help be thought partners with you. Remember this. Once you define your project measures and type them into the G5 system where your annual performance report is submitted, those are set in stone. So right now we have a little bit of window to tinker with them, to really get them good and smart and tightly coupled with our approved proposal. But once we submit them into G5, and this will be the first time that we type them into G5 for the ARP-AIRE program, we're going to use, you're stuck with those exact project measures for the life of your ARP-AIRE grant program. So knowing that your APR is the opportunity to demonstrate and report progress towards the objectives that were defined in that proposal, your approved proposal really should be the starting point for crafting those project measures. So specifically that logic model that was included in the approved proposal, all proposals were expected to include one. You can start with that, with your grant program's logic model. And by doing that, you're really more likely to be assured that your project measures are aligned with those stated and desired outcomes. The logic model likely contains information that'll lend itself, they'll feed right into nicely into a project measure for you. It might include specific activities, measures, or maybe even timelines that can help you develop those SMART program measures. So let's take a look at some examples together here. A little shout out here to our colleagues at the Department of Diné Education on the Navajo Nation. This is an excerpt from their logic model that was submitted in their application. And you can see at the top there, they have one overarching goal. And of course, there's more, but we just pulled a little excerpt. And then beneath that goal, listed from left to right, we see that they've included objectives and right above where the objective wording is, right, that sort of middle gray color, I guess. You see a rationale where they actually provide a little bit of their reasoning behind why they listed that objective. Some of their rationales have more than one objective, but this was a nice one because it was a nice one objective that we could use to work with here. So moving over to the right, we see that they've also articulated the specific activities, the intended outcomes, as well as the data and the measure that they're going to use to assess progress on that specific objective. So all of that really can feed directly into the development of a SMART project measure. So we're going to come back to this in a minute, but first let's review what we mean by SMART. And I know that you probably have seen this before. Maybe I could get a thumbs up from you if on the screen or in the chat box or using those reaction buttons at the bottom of your screen. Maybe you can give us a thumbs up if you've seen this acronym before. Does this look familiar? Got a few people. Don't have too many people on screen today. Okay, good. Yep. All right. So some of you have seen the SMART acronym before. Let me ask this one more question. Have you used the SMART acronym in relation to your program measures or with setting goals or objectives for your OIE programs? Anybody use the SMART acronym in this context specifically? Okay, totally cool. That's what we're going to do today. So we're all going to get a little practice with this today. So we wanted to lift this up because the SMART acronym has been around for a good little while, but it's really a nice check to make sure that we're making things really specific, measurable, attainable relevant, and time bound. So if you are able to include all of these elements into your goals, or in this case, your program measures, you're really going to have a clear aim and purpose and be able to demonstrate the impact of your project. So just to quickly review, a SMART statement or SMART goal or a SMART project measure, and I'm probably going to use those terms a little bit interchangeably in our session today, is specific. The goal is detailed, focused, clearly stated. Everyone reading the goals should know exactly what your program is trying to achieve. It's measurable. That means that it's quantifiable. You can see the results and you can gauge if you've been successful. It's attainable. So we want to stretch and we want to push to accomplish our goals, but we don't want it to be impossible. So attainable. And relevant. Those relevant goals should be very tightly coupled with the goals and objectives in your approved application that represent the vision of the project and the needs that you've identified. And finally, time bound. A time-based goal has specific timelines and deadlines, and this can be a real motivator to help move towards that goal, as well as evaluate your progress. And when we look for these characteristics, this time-bound one can be one that often gets left out. But without a time frame, there's really no sense of urgency. You can think of it as the difference between I'd like to go to Europe someday, a wish, versus I'm going to Europe before December, which really sets you up for something specific, a goal that you can achieve by that date. Okay, so starting with that SMART project objective can really help you get focused on accomplishing those goals, and it makes it easier to evaluate your success further on down the road. Why are we lifting this up? Here's a few reasons or benefits how it can support your program. Excuse me. The first being outcomes. When your goals and objectives are written and respond to your and are very tightly coupled with those approved that approved project proposal, you'll be able to articulate very clearly your progress, and you can help your program and as well as your students move forward. Expectations. Your team will fully understand what the expectations are and when progress will be measured. You're much more powerful when you can articulate your goals in a smart way to all your team members, as well as some of your supporters or partners, so that everyone's kind of rowing in the same direction and understands what's expected of them. Which leads also to accountability. When there's nothing vague in your goals, it can really help the team become more focused and more successful. It can help to drive those decisions. It provides focus. When we have SMART goals or SMART project measures, it really demonstrates the priorities to the team. Staff know what to focus on. They know what their priorities should be. It also helps project leaders, be focused throughout the project and kind of serves as a touchstone that you can sort of check yourself against. Everything comes back to those SMART statements. And finally, it creates a common purpose. A shared purpose can really drive action. But if you've ever taken part in a team building activity, or maybe you've been rowing in a canoe together, or paddling in a canoe together, or rowing in a boat together, when everyone's in sync, when everyone's moving towards the same goal, things move very smoothly. And when you're unfocused or working at different times or counterintuitively, you can get off track. So the same thing is true when writing your SMART goals or your SMART project measures. You might actually engage your team, write them together, share them with everyone on the team, and have them weigh in on strategies to help reach those goals. It'll help build that common purpose and a shared understanding. Okay. So a few tips. We're going to do this here in a minute, working with your specific logic models, but a few tips to get started, and we'll do a little practice. When you're writing your project measures, we want to keep it to one sentence. We don't want vague phrases, right? If you're too vague, then you're not going to know when you reach your goal or when you've reached that outcome or objective. We've listed some action words on the screen there. We encourage you to use action words to describe what you want to achieve. It helps to make sure that it's measurable. So you see there are some examples on the screen, and maybe you have others. Or if you're a word nerd like me, you might have a thesaurus nearby. Action words like develop, plan, design, describe, demonstrate, create are all lend themselves to nice, SMART statements. All right, so those of you with some experience of doing this know it can be a little bit tricky. But with a little practice, you'll flex that muscle and you'll get stronger with it. So let's look at a few examples together, and then we'll get into some breakout rooms and you'll get a chance to do this on your own. So over there on the left, you see our criteria, our SMART criteria. And I'm going to bring up an example here. Students who attend the XYZ program will improve their mathematical abilities. Which of any of the criteria do you feel that this particular statement meets? Is it specific? Is it measurable? Is it achievable? Relevant? Is it time bound? Feel free to type your response into the chat box or come off mute if you want to share verbally. Ms. Silverthorne Wolf, I see you typed measurable. Are you saying it is measurable, or is it lacking, not measurable? John says it's not measurable as written. We have some differences of opinion. Okay, this is going to be fun. We have some others saying it's missing time and it's general. So it does say that we want to improve mathematical abilities. So in that sense, we know what we want to measure, but it doesn't really get specific with how we're going to measure it, or which mathematical abilities maybe we want to improve. So this really is a little bit more general. We would push as your technical assistance team to get maybe a little bit more specific. We would agree that this is probably relevant, right? If this were an actual program measure that was developed by a grantee, it no doubt relates to a program. But we could push to get a little bit more specific, more descriptive in the measurable sense, so that we have a sense if it's achievable. We'll know when we've achieved it or if we haven't. All right, let's take a look at it in a slightly different format now. So this person kind of reworked this a little bit and added a bit more detail. So I'll just give you a minute to read. I'll read it aloud on the screen here. So this time it says 73% of students who attend the XYZ program at least, start over. 73% of students who attend the XYZ program at least 88% of available program hours and score below proficiency at the beginning of the year math benchmarks will increase their mathematical abilities as follows. And we see some specific measures there for 3rd, 4th, 5th grade and which mathematical abilities we're looking at. And then the last part says, increases will be measured at the individual student level using end of year mathematical benchmark scores. Definitely more specific, right? Yes. We have some details in there about what we're measuring. We know how it's going to be measured. We would agree that this one is much more specific, measurable. It should feel achievable, and it's definitely relevant. We didn't click time bound in here, although it does say that, you know, using end of year math benchmark scores, so we know, we have a sense of the timing of terms of when that data is going to be looked at, but it doesn't give us any specifics about when we're going to assess progress or when we're going to look at that measure. And we know it's available, right, at the end of the year, but when do we want to see this improvement by? One final example here. It's also, I would also say that this one would be a little bit wordy, right? This doesn't exactly align with our recommendation about making it one sentence. But maybe we worked through this longer version to get to here. Our final example. By the end of the program year, at least 70% of students who regularly attend, and by that we mean at least 50% of program hours, who regularly attend the XYZ program will demonstrate increased mathematical abilities as measured by beginning and end of year math benchmark tests. Does this one meet our criteria? Does this one meet our SMART criteria? Is there anything missing? Any thoughts out there? Feel free to come off mute or type into the chat box. Got it, looks good. Does somebody want to add a comment? Got a thumbs up there, a couple thumbs ups. Yeah, we would agree that this one, this example finally ticks off all of those SMART criteria. Okay. Well, that was sort of a general example that we worked through. In your program, you know, there's no specific number of project measures that you have to have. Typically, we see anywhere between two to 6, but we've seen more. Much like we talked about, you know, like refining that example that we just looked at, you may want to really hone the focus of your program measures so that it really captures what your program is doing and wants to impact. So on the screen now is a bit of a template. I love a good template. I find them really helpful to help keep my brain focused and make sure I hit all those elements that are required. This is a template that might be helpful when you're creating your program goals and looking back at your logic model and that approved application. You're not required to follow this template, but you may find it helpful to help support the creation of a SMART goal if you're just getting started. So let me just click through an example here of how this worked for the program measure that we were just looking at. First, we consider the time. When do we want to see this improvement by? In this case, we said the end of the program year.
Good morning, Christina speaking.
Oops, there we go. Who are we trying to impact? In this case, we wanted to impact at least 70% of students who attend regularly. And attend regularly could be a really vague term, but in this case, we've defined that as participants who attend at least 50% of the program hours. What do we want to see? What change do we want to see? We want to see a demonstrated increase in mathematical abilities. And what is the measurement? How are we going to measure that? We're going to look at beginning and end of year math benchmark scores. So you can see that by kind of filling in some notes around that template really lent itself to developing that SMART project measure. So let's take a look back now at our example from the Navajo Nation and our colleagues there. Looking on the screen and looking at this excerpt from the logic model, do you see any text that lends itself to a SMART project measure? Maybe starting with the who. If we were going to develop a project measure for this program objective, do you see any language that looks at who the intended focus is? Feel free to come off mute or type into the chat box. Ms. Silverthorne Wolf, I see participating schools, good, good. Yeah, I can. It says right at the top there, we can see where it says, let's see. Link diverse school districts across the Navajo Nation. Underneath activity it says all participating schools. Very good. How about the what? Do we see any text lending itself to the what of our project measures? What does our grantee want to improve? Again, feel free to come off mute or type in the chat box. See, Talia typed in cultural responsiveness. Okay, so the overarching goal up there at the top, we know that they want to enhance cultural responsiveness. How about looking at the objective there, that column listed on the left? Anything, do we see anything else specifically that they want to change or impact? What is it they want to improve? Thank you, Julie. School climate.
School climate.
Okay, very good. School climate, school safety. We see in that left-hand column there that they said they want to measure school climate to assess social emotional learning needs, as well as school safety and mental health concerns. So they kind of wrap those specific elements up underneath that title of school climate. Good. How about now the measure? How do they propose to measure this?
Survey.
Okay, they've identified a pre and post survey so that they have they plan to collect some data pre and post at 2 different times to be able to compare. Is there anything that we can pull in terms of like how much they want to change or to what extent they want to change? I see Julie typed in there again, increase positive climate by 10%. All right, great. So those are all the things that we pulled out of here in this little excerpt. You know, that they want to impact all participating schools on the Navajo Nation. They want to increase that school climate by 10%, and they're going to assess that with a climate survey that looks at SEL needs, school safety, mental health concerns by administering that pre and post survey. The only piece that we didn't see in the excerpt, and it could be elsewhere in the proposal, or maybe it's a task for the leadership team to sit down and make that particular project measure time bound. So we would want to say by the end of the project year, or by the summer, or give it some kind of end date, so we know that when we're going to assess this particular project measure. Okay, well, thank you for playing along with that example, and to the Navajo Nation for writing such a great logic model for us to use as an example here. Now we want to give you an opportunity to get into some small groups and do some work with your specific project measure. So we're going to give you some time in some breakout rooms. We'll have 2 to 3 people in each breakout room. If you have your approved project proposal handy, it'll really help. Maybe you know it really well, and you have some of that knowledge is in your head. That's okay too. If you have an electronic copy that you want to do some copying and pasting from, or maybe a screen share in your breakout rooms, that can be really helpful. So the idea is that when you get into your breakout rooms, you will all 2 or 3 of you will work together on one project measure at a time. So we'll have one person to volunteer. This is our logic model, or this is the part of the logic model that I want to work on a project measure for. We know we need a project measure around this topic, and then you will all work together. In a minute, we're going to put a link to a Jamboard slide in the chat box, and it's going to look just like the screen that you see in here. So we've given you a template. You can use the Jamboard to record your work and develop a project measure. So you're gonna have probably about 15 minutes to work on this in your breakout rooms. If you get all the way through one, fabulous. Go ahead and pick another one, a different grantee and a different logic model to work with, and develop at least one project measure. If you get through one, that's fine. That's great. Okay, but we want to give this a little bit of time for you to work together on this. So on the screen is the Jamboard. Okay, and I just want to give you a peek at this before we turn you loose in the breakout room, so you know what to expect. When you get into your breakout rooms, we want you to go to the section of the Jamboard that corresponds with your breakout room number. So when you get into your breakout rooms, pay attention to what room you're getting into. If you're going to breakout room 2, you can use these little navigation arrows at the top of the Jamboard's screen to kind of go through and come to breakout room 2, and you will have 2 templates, because I think that's probably about how much time we'll be able. If you get through more than one, I'll be impressed for any group that gets through 2. If you do get to 3, great. We can add another slide for you. Okay. Any questions about what we're doing, or what's expected when you get into your breakout rooms? Any questions? Any final opportunities to ask questions before we get in there? I'm going to go ahead and post some directions in the chat box, so you can refer back to that if you have any questions. Take a minute or 2 to introduce yourselves to each other if you don't already know each other. If you want to have one person who's recording on the Jamboard, that works. You can always send us, your facilitators, a message to either to me, Olani, or Sarah Whitehead. We're all on here. If you have any questions, you can do that from the chat box, and we're going to pop in and out actually of the rooms just to make sure everyone's going forward and has what they need. Okay, and we see that Alani's posted the Jamboard link, so go ahead and grab that now. You want to click on that so you can all work together in the same Jamboard slide for your breakout room. Sarah's going to open up the breakout rooms, and remember to pay attention to which room you're going to. And then you're going to go to that section of the Jamboard slide. And we will see you back here in about 12 to 15 minutes. Okay. Hey, Gina, did you have any questions for us? Okay, maybe she had to step away for a minute. All right, I'm going to go check on rooms 1, 3, and 5. Well, 3 and 5.
One doesn't have anybody because who it randomly assigned was just one of our grantees. So I kind of moved them.
Yeah, no, that's probably fine. I wonder too if Gina's not able to join, if we want to put Chris in room
I can put her in 4.
Okay, yeah. Okay. And that means I'll go check out room 5 real quick.
Alani, do you want me to put you in room 4?
I did 2. Beth is there. She's doing her thing.
Oh.
And I'm going to go. Sorry, you said something about 4?
Yep, 4 or 5. Where do you guys want to go?
I'm gonna go join 5. I can join.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll go 4.
Okay. Thanks, Alani.
Mm-hmm.
Hey,
Hey,
going on? All right. Yeah, we should probably give them, should we give them the 60-second warning to wrap up?
yeah, I can do that.
Okay.
It looks like we have everyone back with us.
Oh, super duper. All right. Thank you, everybody, for playing along and engaging in that activity. I know we're starting to get towards the top of the hour and the end of our session. So I want to share first the Jamboard link again, in case anybody wants to revisit what you captured in your breakout rooms. And maybe we could get a couple of folks to share. How did that feel? How did that exercise feel?
I was pleased that we went through it because it's unusual. For me, this grant was a little bit different. And Lonnie helped us work through a major goal of our project to put the time, the who, the what, and the measurement tool to make that clear for us. So it was uncomfortable.
That's okay. Yeah, I can see. You know, it's sometimes it feels like it's the kind of thing that can you're like, yes, I get it. I understand. Smart, of course, you know, and then when you start to dig into the work, it's like, oh, well, how does that, is this really what we're working towards, or when are we going to do it, or what makes the most sense? Yeah. Any other reflections? I know it can be an exercise too, just in revisiting that approved proposal to really pull out that pertinent information that's needed. Sometimes that's the biggest hurdle, sometimes just to get that and make sure you're working with the right information. So I'm just clicking here so you can kind of see on screen some of the examples that your colleagues are working through. Some of you got through it. Some of you are still kind of tinkering around with it, and that's all good. We really just wanted to give you opportunity and time to workshop this together. So that when you're back in your office and you're writing your project measures in preparation for that APR, because you're gonna You're going to need to know the measure, and you're going to need to know the data that you need to collect to be able to report on it. And you've got a little window of time between now and the time that's due to work on that. Okay, I'm going to bring us back to the slide deck now. And just very quickly, oh, sorry, I'm gonna move that out of the way. So those, we were working specifically with your project measures. On the screen right now, you actually see the language around your GEPRA measure, that specific government measure that everybody will be reporting on. So I'll just read it real quickly. The number of grantees that attain or exceed the targets for the outcome indicators for their projects that have been approved by the secretary. Now, I know this probably, the wording of this might be a little bit confusing or but basically this functions as a summary of your project measures. So when it comes to this GEPRA measure, and we're going to have a whole webinar devoted solely to your APRs, and I'll share that date with you before we close out today, where we'll get into this a little bit more deeply. But basically, for your one GEPRA measure, you're going to tell us how many of those project measures that you met. Okay, so that's what the GEPRA measure is for your ARP-AIRE program. Okay. So we have about 15 minutes now before we're scheduled to close. And we wanted to make sure that we carved out some time to talk about this other very important time-bound requirement that comes along with your ARP-AIRE grant. And that is your agreements with your local education agencies. So the requirement is that within 6 months after the date of the award, grantees must submit to the department signed written agreements with each LEA where participating students are enrolled. So the vision is that this agreement must include provisions that allow the grantee to access the data that's necessary for success of the project and for reporting on project objectives. Now, if you're in a situation where you're working with schools or LEAs or those tribally controlled schools, and the grant is also controlled by the same tribal nation, then you're lucky. You're not required to have a data sharing agreement, because the assumption is that you're all one organization and you'll have access to that. But for everybody else, we need to have these agreements in place. So I want to open it up now just to share some successes or challenges that you may be experiencing. What is the status of your data sharing agreement? What successes have you had in working with your LEAs? What challenges are you encountering? And feel free to talk to each other. You don't necessarily have to go through me, but let's take the next 10 minutes here to just share some thoughts and experiences. And maybe we even have, there's a lot of experience and expertise here in the virtual room as well. Maybe we have some ideas to help each other.
Were you wanting us to share out loud, Tracy?
Yeah, feel free to come off mute. Sorry, I should have made that clear. Yep.
Well, could have been my misunderstanding. Because of a House bill that was passed last year in the state of Idaho, House Bill 377, the bill is misunderstood. It was wanting to prevent critical race theory from being taught in our schools. And so in the designing of our application, we made sure that the tribe was able to implement this cultural program. In designing the agreement, I kept it pretty simple, and it was to data share. and the superintendent did approve. However, we have a waiver that has been approved by both attorneys that has been signed by parents that allow us to access the students' academic and attendance data. And that's part of the application process that parents receive. That waiver that has been designed as part of the enrollment process.
I see. So if I understand correctly, then you're getting the permission of each individual family or student to share their data?
Yes, we have. It's part of the application process, but for this particular grant, we wanted to make sure that we would be able to continue to access via the waiver, the academic and attendance data.
Gotcha.
And the superintendent did sign off on that. But it was a great worry for me because of the House Bill 377.
Mm-hmm. Certainly adds another layer of challenge.
Mm-hmm.
How about others? Have you been able to move forward with your LEAs, or are you encountering any challenges or roadblocks?
I have a question.
Please.
We have typically had LEA agreements. They are usually only, the school district usually only allows them to be 1 year at a time. Is that something that's going to cause issues? We're trying to put it forward. We haven't gotten it to the school district yet that shows the life of the grant, but I have a feeling when the school district comes back, they're going to try to put it only as a 1 year at a time.
Yeah, I suspect that might be the case with other folks too, that there's a time limit and it needs to be renewed periodically. Shala, I don't know, or others, I don't know if there's anything you want to weigh in there, if that's a hindrance.
Yeah, that's it's one of those challenges that some grantees may be facing. In the application that was published, and the notice inviting application, we did say that this program was 36 months, and the assumption is that the agreement would also be for 36 months. Now, if you find yourself in one of those situations where your school district agrees to only like an annual agreement, then I guess it's your job to make sure that it's annually reviewed and approved. Our main concern is that when you go through this extra step, if you have to take an extra step to make sure it's annually ratified, to make sure that you do have a statement in there that allows you access to the data you need in order to, that you have access to data sharing information. So just make sure that if it's annually reviewed, that piece of basically that piece of information is included. So it's not a general sort of, agreement that you're agreeing to be renewed. I don't know if that's the case with most of you, but if you find yourself in a situation like that where you're being challenged in terms of even that part of it, then you and I can have a discussion to see if there is a way to work around the issue. But the agreement has to be for 36 months. I hope this answers your question.
Any follow-up questions for you there, Krista?
I had just a question. How are folks getting schools to cooperate with them. Like probably the biggest thing we hear is FERPA. Like FERPA overrides the partnership agreements and the sharing agreements. Does anyone else get that, or has anyone else figured out a way to get around that? That's what the lawyers tell them, I guess.
Well, again, this is the Coeur d'Alene tribe. The school attorney and the tribal attorney met and reviewed our waiver. And once that waiver has been signed off from the parent, it allows us to access the academic and attendance data.
Right. So that's the obstacle we have, is getting the parents,
Oh,
well, getting the school to distribute the 506 form, and then if they do distribute, then getting it back from the parents. But the schools really don't even want to distribute it.
oh.
Have you had your tribal attorney to speak with whoever representing the school district to see if there is a way around it, if it can be, something can be worked out?
Yeah, I think it's an ongoing thing that
Right.
Roxanne is working on with the attorney. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think Chris Myers from Coeur d'Alene is, giving a very good example of how there's, you can kind of look for a workaround kind of way to not only satisfy what this program requires you to do, but also to satisfy the LEAs you're working with. So, yeah, good luck to you though.
I've heard a number of grantees talk about getting the individual waivers or permissions from parents and guardians of program participants as one possible workaround. Sometimes I've heard some other examples where instead of being able to access just raw data, that they were able to work out that the LEA or the district is giving reports, providing reports with data, and FERPA, it's for good reason, right? Everybody takes FERPA very seriously, and so they want to know that there's protections in place, that data, there won't be any accidental disclosures, that it's protected. They want to know who's going to have access to it, and that data is going to be respected and used appropriately. So sometimes it's a matter of building that relationship and understanding of how we're going to use it, where it's going to be stored, making sure that all those kinds of assurances are in place, so that the LEA can feel comfortable that they're not going to violate FERPA by working and providing you with the information. Other examples, I know people, in examples where there's a really tight relationship, that's been growing over time, where somebody like, a fellow grantee might actually have their own login for the data portal and can have, set up their reports and stuff so that they can look at it. But those are all just different examples of how it's been approached. And I see Olani, thank you for putting in that link into the chat box around the FERPA training. I know on our OIE technical assistance YouTube page, we've also had some sessions around data sharing, where we really kind of dive into FERPA, so that you can get all up to date on all things related to that, and maybe be able to give some assurances to your LEAs as you work on these data sharing agreements. And as Shala said, if there's a way, if you would need to talk through things with her, she can be available for support as well.
Right, and this was a requirement in the grant application, and if you run into a situation when there is absolutely no way for you to work with your school partners, then please let me know so I can run it by our program attorney and see that if there is a there is a way around to work around that issue. So just keep me informed about the outcome. As was mentioned earlier, this is due in late May. So don't wait until then to find out, if there is a problem with it. Let me know as soon as possible, so I can get some help on that. Thanks.
Thank you. Okay, and we dropped it. Lonnie dropped another link into the chat box there with that link to the data sharing agreement session that we did. Feel free to pull that up and watch that as you need, as you see fit. In the last couple of minutes that we have, we're going to put up our end of session poll. While I still have those of you who are with us here, if you would respond to that poll and tell us, what worked well about today's talking circle session. We always look at that data, reflect on how we can make these more relevant and useful to you. So please take a couple of minutes before leaving. And while you're doing that, I'm going to take us through to the end with some exciting announcements and some dates to share. Maybe you already saw on the OIE webpage, but in honor of the Office of Indian Education's 50th anniversary, we're excited to announce the return of the Student Artist Competition for 2022. So you see on the screen there, we have our theme that there's 3 main categories: art, which could include any kind of medium for students in early childhood through grade 12. There's the category of writing for students in grades 4 through 12. There's video, a video category, again, for students in grades 4 through 12. So please do check that out and share this information. Encourage your youth to submit some entries. We're so excited about this, and we can't wait to see all the amazing things that your students are creating out there. Also, save this date, May 10th through 12th. This is when the project directors meeting will take place. It will be a virtual gathering again this year. This is one of your grant requirements that all project directors will attend this meeting. So we're in the process now of getting that organized, and we look forward to having you there. All right, that's our poll slide. So you're doing that. Thank you. I see we've got some responses already. So here's some important dates. I mentioned that APR webinar for the ARP-AIRE program. Mark your calendars for May 23rd from 1:30 to 3 p.m. Eastern. If you're not able to make that date, we will have the recording available for you. So you'll definitely want to check that out. Between now and then, we have another talking circle. So on May 18th, same time, same channel, we'll be here. We'll be able to talk a little bit more about that as you're getting ready for your APRs. Maybe you'll have all your project measures developed and have them all smart, and we'll be able to share some updates on that. Those are quarterly, so May is the next one. And then there's office hours too. So you can always drop into the office hours. You can drop in and out as needed to get your questions asked. That's a more of an informal type setting where you'll have direct access to your program officers for your ARP-AIRE grant program, as well as any other OIE grant programs that you may operate. March 24th is the next date, so just a couple of weeks from now. Maybe you're starting to work on those project measures or data sharing agreements. If you have questions about those, you can pop into the office hours and get your questions answered. Those happen the 4th Thursday of every month. All right. So thank you all for joining today and participating. I hope you found this time useful. You see, I'll leave you with this slide that has all of the contact information should you want to reach out to your program officer, Shala Ortega, or anybody here as on the technical assistance team. You have their emails there. And of course, there's always great information available on the Office of Indian Education website as well. Thank you for joining us today.